I love that story because it's like, Medic Mobile shows up, Kat and Will, and they say, there are the secrets of healthcare locked in a box made out of Delphi. How can we unlock this? And what they won't tell you is that it wasn't just coding. Kat basically gave herself an MPH, studying poring over health literature with Will reading information about healthcare in Africa to understand just how to use this thing themselves. And now, Medic Mobile can actually get to the point where they can just scratch the surface of that holy grail of measurement, impact, which for those of you who may not be in the nonprofit world, that's like ROI for social good. So that's a big moment to even be able to have any numbers there. And as Kat pointed out, this is something that other public health organizations can now use as well. It's a little more accessible. It's something that you can walk through and start to measure impact with. So that's awesome. I'm so excited. It's a great project. So next up, we're going to hear from Alex Vaughn, Chris Tynan, and Tushar, who were on Mission Continues. Before I call them up, I want to give a quick warning, a quick note, that the presentation after the Mission Continues, Thorn, does deal with a very sensitive topic. It is on child sex trafficking, which could be a trigger for people in the audience. So we want to let you know in advance in case you wanted to find a reason to go take a phone call or be out of the room for the presentation after this one. Obviously, would never hold it against anyone, just wanted to let everyone know. So, until then, I'd love to call up Alex from the Mission Continues and Chris to come on up here and tell us about their work. So give it up for Alex. Give it up for hydration. Good.
First off, Kat and Will, awesome job with Medic Mobile, and Jake, thank you for referring to us as data warriors. If only I got that term more often. So now the mission continues. Mission Continues was founded in 2007 by its current CEO, Eric, after completing his tour in Iraq as a Navy SEAL. And upon returning home, he and fellow veterans realized that just because they had finished their missions overseas in the military, that their sense of needing to continue with a mission of service and giving back was not done. So that's what the Mission Continues tries to do. It works empowering post-9/11 veterans as they reintegrate into their home communities by helping them find community service missions to give back to their home. Its cornerstone is a 6-month fellowship, as well as newly launched service platoons that are trying to scale this fellowship and give the fellows a sense of leadership in their communities. Since its inception, it's done amazing things, granting several fellowships. It's got a great footprint almost in every state of the US, and they've donated almost 10 million in volunteer service hours. And 5 core values guide them in everything they do: working hard, trust, learning and growing, respect, and having fun. The fellowship program, which is what we directly worked with, is a 6-month program that places fellows who have applied to the Mission Continues with a nonprofit of their choosing. And they work with the nonprofit, they give back to their communities, and they complete a curriculum with the TMC, with Mission Continues, as well as receiving mentoring from a TMC mentor. The curriculum consists of 6-month surveys that touch upon different themes like goals, future goals, contributing to society, who in their life do they consider allies, and who are role models for them. And so our project with the Mission Continues was to figure out what components of this curriculum help lead to the fellows' future success. And a corollary follow-up question is, of these successful veterans, what characteristics can they then use in recruiting? We used 3 fellowship cohorts from 2013 based on their completion and also sort of curriculum consistency. So things that might have sort of invalidated a cohort from inclusion were that their data were not mined, or that the curriculum changed to a point where it couldn't be compared. And current in-progress fellowships were also excluded. So a big component of our project was figuring out where data was and how it was stored. So we had data in very different places. So for example, demographic and application information was housed in Salesforce, whereas the surveys, which was sort of the basis of our project, was housed in Qualtrics, as well as being created there. TMC also works with Palantir, and that was sort of another place where they are currently trying to pull in all data so it can be in one source. So a lot of what we worked with was trying to figure out how can we get all these different types and formats of data to talk to each other. In answering our question with the TMC, they wanted to know what success is. And so we had to define success. And we tried to figure out what is that dependent variable. So things that we looked at were post-alumni metrics. From previous research, Mission Continue knows that pre and post completing their fellowship, fellows report a better, improved quality of life. So we thought that would be a great place to start. There was really no control data. So since we knew from previous research that was like a sort of validated point, we moved on. Fellowship completion rate. So who in month 1 is also there in month 6? And that was a place we looked. And so that's got a very high completion rate at about 85%. Fellow responsiveness. Once fellows are in the survey, how quickly are they responding? That's sort of a measure that the TMC uses, at the submission date, how a measure, days late. We use text analytic metrics like word count and other responsiveness measures. And then in the first and 6th month, the first month they set goals for the fellowship. In the last month, they are asked directly, did they meet those goals? And there are 3 goals. And so we thought, in looking for these success metrics, this was a great place to start because it's a self-reported measure of the fellow's opinion on whether they were successful. There are 3 goals: a fellowship goal, so that they meet their service goal in the fellowship, a professional goal for the future, and then a continued service goal, which is sort of all about what the Mission Continues is trying to do to inspire the fellows to go out and continue to serve.
Cool. Hey, I'm Chris. I feel bad because I get Alex all the slides with text on, and now I've got the slides with graphs on. Sorry, Alex. So this is kind of the part where we talk about the actual analysis that we did and how we came to the conclusions that we did. But before I even talk too much about this slide and sort of the things that we looked at, one of the things that was worth iterating, probably a common problem amongst other nonprofits as well, is that actually a lot of the work was just getting the data. It was actually getting the data to a point where we could do something with it and actually analyze it. So Alex mentioned that we were using Palantir, we were using Qualtrics. I don't know if anyone here has actually ever used Qualtrics before. I hope you haven't had to, because it's horrible. I don't wish that on anyone. Sorry, Aaron. But we spent a lot of time in just kind of putting together this data from different cohorts. It was kind of grouped in different places, and the curriculum itself is an evolving thing. It would change from cohort to cohort. So we kind of had to use some sort of sense of human judgment in is this question really asking the same thing amongst different groups? And so just to start with, it's a couple of slides on the demographic breakdown of the fellows. These are actually who the fellows are. And we have a whole bunch of different metrics that we had. So we have specific demographic metrics. We have a priori measurement metrics, there's this metric that the Mission Continues captures called a prospect rating. And it's something they use when they interview people, because the program is not just that anyone who wants to go can be on it. Actually, they have to apply, which in turn creates a self-selection bias. But then they have to be interviewed by the Mission Continues. And regardless of whether they get on the program or not, the Mission Continues assigns them a prospect rating from 0 to 100%. And that was one of the key metrics that we thought would have sort of causal impacts later on, but we'll come to that. And then we have demographic information, and we also have information during the fellowship and some alumni data as well. So this is specifically about the fellows. So the gender split is 70-30 male to female. The education ratio is that over 50% have college graduates, either a 2-year degree, a 4-year degree, or higher. And the service time median is just short of 6 years. 2 bar charts here to remove the text for a bit. You can see the military service breakdown. I'm not sure if it's fully readable. But the most common group is the Army. It was 45% of Mission Continuous Fellows. Marine Corps, 28% second. Interesting thing about this graph is that Marine Corps heavily over-indexes compared to the general post 9/11 veteran population. And actually, the Air Force is the one that under-indexes. Maybe Aaron can talk about that later. But it's very interesting to kind of see that reflected in the stats. Also on the right-hand side, the fellows are asked to pick an alumni goal type. This is kind of what they consider. They get 4 options as to what they think their future goal is, their main focus. The 2 primary ones are employment and education. This bar graph in the bottom right breaks it down. The red lines are from fellows that had served more than the median service length of a Mission Continuous Fellow. The blue is those that had served less. And the 2 biggest ones are employment and education. It's not too surprising, particularly with the GI Bill. A lot of Mission Continuous Fellows are still quite young and they're focusing on education. But an interesting fact here, even in a small sample size, was that fellows that were serving longer were more likely to pick continued service to the community, and fellows that were serving less were more interested in entrepreneurship. And then a very quick slide continuing from this. The fellows pick different types of host organizations. On the left-hand side is a donor graph. Roughly half the organizations that the fellows work with were social improvement related nonprofits. A quarter of them were military, and then the remaining quarter came from disaster relief, education, and environmental. And on the right-hand side is some work that our colleague Tusha has helped us put together. It's just a word cloud analyzing common words when fellows were asked to kind of define what they meant by success, by what they mean if they had a successful fellowship or not. So there were 3 key metrics that we looked at. One was goal achievement. This is a subjective metric, as Alex mentioned earlier. You can see in the top left that fellowship goal was 75% achieved, professional 45, continued service 61. Professional is the lowest because it tends to pertain to like future goals, and it's not something that that will often be realized in the 6 months of the fellowship itself. It's kind of a broader, longer-term goal. Interestingly, the kind of percentages of goal achievement were pretty static across all cohorts that we looked at. And the other thing that was very interesting to look at was in the bottom right, you can see the number of goals achieved by fellow. And when we looked at this early on, we actually noticed a relationship, which was that the kind of goal achievement was independent between goals. So it wasn't if you, for example, achieved the fellowship goal, you were more likely to achieve the professional goal as one might think. It was actually independent between goals, which was quite interesting. And one thing we found in this whole process was actually sometimes when you find significant results, that's interesting, but it's also interesting to find things which aren't significant, where correlation doesn't exist, where one might expect it to. And that was in the bottom left graph here, was an example of that. There was actually no significant relationship between prospect rating, measured in these different intervals, and the number of goals that people achieved, which we thought there probably would be, but there actually wasn't. This is some word count analysis that we did. So, as Alex mentioned, the fellowship involves 6 month-long surveys. And the first month is the most intense in terms of the number of words that fellows write. So that's something that was interesting for us to see. A couple of other points that were interesting here was that men tended to write more than women, but women actually used better English according to LIWC analysis that we did. And the final thing in the bottom right here is a graph that's quite hard to read here, I admit. But it's a relationship between how much people write in month 1 and how much they continue to write. And it was a pretty strong, significant correlation. And this just shows that we don't want to say there's a causal relationship here, but there's definitely good reason to believe that it's important to get fellows engaged in month 1 if you want them to continue to be engaged in the curriculum as they go forward. This is a slide on responsiveness, which was the final sort of success metric we looked at. So this is a metric that the mission continues to look at, and it kind of looks at how late or on time the fellows actually answered the surveys. And so this was the other place where we found significant correlation. It was 72%, 73% between a prospect rating and the number of months delivered on time. But one of the things we found is that there wasn't really correlations between many of the pairs of variables we thought were going to be key. I have to rush through, sorry. Jake is getting angry at me. There's only 2 more slides, I'll be quick. I want to just quickly thank Tusha. He did a lot of work in text analysis that really helped us. So we did, one of the things we can't really talk about here is because we don't have time, but there's like hundreds and hundreds of questions in this survey, and we picked out like 10 to 20 key ones, and we analyzed what people said, and we analyzed themes, emotions, split it down by gender. We looked at common bigrams and trigrams, what people said. We looked at the most kind of relevant responses, and it was really fascinating to read the responses and to see some of the incredible stuff that people write about. And finally, on the recommendations, our conclusion overall was that the mission continues to do an exceptional job with the fellowship program, has a very low dropout rate, consistently high rate of goal achievement, and our recommendations are really specifically to the capturing of data so that as we go forward, we can move away from doing text analysis and into doing more sort of like quantitative pre and post metrics. Thank you.
Sorry that I had to get all angry. Before we do move on, I did just want to say something quickly, which is that we are delighted to have Aaron Scheinberg here, who is at the Mission Continues, who worked with these guys in and out, day in and day out, on this project, and I want to give him a chance to come up here, be congratulated, and say a few words. So, yeah.
Hello everyone, Aaron Scheinberg with the Mission Continues. Just as Chris and Alex mentioned, the Mission Continues empowers veterans, many of whom have served in Iraq and Afghanistan, to take what they had in the military and put it to use here at home. Through the fellowship program, through the service platoon program, we're enabling veterans to continue their service, and it's just been amazing. I've been here for 2 years with the Mission Continues. I'm a veteran of Iraq myself, and it's given me the sense of being engaged in really the reason why I joined the military to begin with, to serve my country. So that's what the Mission Continues does. We've worked with almost 1,000 fellows so far, and we're constantly trying to develop and improve our programs. And I can't thank Chris and Alex enough for all the time they've put in, not just on the analysis and, of course, figuring out all of our data to begin with, but for being kind of advisors and mentors to me and our team. You saw some big numbers that we've worked with, 1,000 veterans. We've got 30,000 volunteers across the country. We're a national veterans organization, but we only have me and Oliver Gould working on strategy and research and evaluation. We don't have an IT department. We don't have anyone, at the time we didn't have anyone managing Salesforce. So we really rely on people like Alex and Chris and DataCorps to supplement what we're trying to do, because we invest most of our efforts and money into the programs. And when Jade came to us and said that DataCorps was going to work with the Mission Continues, I was humbled and excited, and it's just met all of my expectations and more. So thank you so much for joining the Mission Continues, and we hope to see you here in New York in some of our future service missions.
Thank you there. It's extremely humbling because really we felt exactly the same way. We're like, oh my God, the Mission Continues is going to work with us. This is great. Obviously, there's a lot of kinship with these guys because they do volunteer work, and so we're very spiritually aligned in that regard. But also, I think one of the things that's really interesting about this project is that, we're starting to see maybe this common thread where there aren't always resources to deal with getting this data together and handling it. I mean, I'll be the first to admit that we're we're data people. We have multiple systems. We're just trying to put them together, talk to Pete, our data engineer. But the poor guy's headaches, it is tough when you're outside of industry to have really streamlined data pipelines. So it's a really interesting process to get all that together. Also, I think this is great work, even though I have my own personal feelings about word clouds. They really show interesting stuff, which is to me that a lot of groups have surveys. And how do you analyze a survey? What do you do beyond just looking at the responses, the number of responses? How do you look at the words of people running? I want to be remembered as truly wanting the best for others, valuing the power of education. That's beautiful. That's not something you're going to find just in a 1 through 5 that you like this. And having tools like this and people who know how to analyze that stuff is so important for the mission continues and for other groups as well. So thank you guys again. Give it up for Alex, Chris, and Tushar, who did all